Alright, back in the garage working on the Jeep. I got the old Fender Flares removed in the last video. Also had to replace the water pump because I guess it's a common problem on the 4-liter. It was leaking and it looked like it was coming from the bottom front of the engine, but there's a weep hole in the water pump that starts leaking. So not too bad of a project. Took me only about an hour using aftermarket parts. Got that all back together, and today I'm going to be getting some looks and functional items put on the Jeep. So I got like a side rocker protector that goes about that level there, and it's a vinyl, a textured vinyl. And I'm not really going for like serious, like a rock slider type protection, just something more for looks. And then I got these flat Fender Flares that I'm going to be installing to give myself a little bit more tire coverage. These stock flares didn't stick out far enough to cover the offset on these 31-inch aftermarket wheels tire combo. So with the flat fenders here, it will just cover the tire and keep mud and dirt from blowing up on the side of the Jeep. And when you live on a dirt road like I do, it's not just a cosmetic thing, it's a very functional thing to keep. Especially if your top is off and your windows are down, you're going to get sprayed with mud if you don't have these. So I'll be installing those after I get the side stripes on. But I figured I'd show you how that process works. So here are what the textured vinyl looks like. And there's two of these, one for each side. I also got some of the Fender top protectors that go over here, but I'm not going to put them on yet because I don't really care for how they look. I was going to cover a little bit of rust bubbling that I had going on, but I just went ahead and fixed that rust. So that's another thing. I had a spot here that I fixed. Then on the other side of the Jeep, remember from my previous videos, there was a rust spot, and that has been completely repaired. I fixed that also. But anyway, these bought from Quadrajet and Quadratech, excuse me. But they're the Tough Stuff products, rocker protectors, and they have pretty good reviews. You'll need some rubbing alcohol to clean the Jeep, and then they suggest a hair dryer and scissors. But the hair dryer is mainly once you get it on to get it pressed down in the seam here. First thing I'm going to do is just spray this down. Glass cleaner. Clean the heavy deposits of dirt off. If you're going to be covering up this area here where the factory plastic pieces, you want to remove those nut certs, that way it sits flush. Once I get that clean, I have these little alcohol pads here. I don't have a bottle, so I'm just going to use these to wipe down the side of the Jeep real good. Alright, once you're sure you got it pretty clean, I can see the level this is going to be. This is a pretty universal kit. It's meant to work on CJs, YJs, and TJs, so you're going to have to do the trimming yourself. Key is just that it extends up under where your factory flares are. So we'll take some masking tape and we will put it along the top here to kind of hold it in place before we start making some cuts. Take my new flare, kind of set it where it's going to be. And it should be right on the line. Yeah, it's right on the line where the factory flare is covered, essentially. So you can still kind of see right here. So all I have to do is make sure it gets past there. Definitely does not help that it is 30 degrees in the garage. Making this stuff a little stiff. Alright, now I'm going to take out a rear flare and just make sure where the line is on it. Same thing on the rear flare. Looks like it goes right where the factory one does. Go ahead and cut these to where I need them to be. I'm obviously going to leave a little bit of overhang. Not going to be anything wrong if it sticks a little bit under the piece there. So before you peel it off, make sure that everything is where you want it to be. Once this is down, you're stuck. Go ahead. Get the first little bit stuck down here. And here's our seam. And I will come back and really get that pushed in there. Leave a little bit of overlap. Alright, so we have it in place. Now I'm going to take the heat gun, make sure that just don't give it too much heat, but I'm going to make sure it's really adhered properly. Just going to kind of work on this right here, making sure it's in the crack. Looks like it's in there good. It's sucked in. When that cools down, it'll be perfect. I got some dirt on my hands. I'm getting all over the place. But yeah, looks good. Alright, so the other side's going to be the exact same thing. Now I'm going to start putting on the fender flares. So the flares were, well, it says part number 17192, but these are a generic flat style Fender Flare that I got on eBay. I paid about $175 for them, which is a lot cheaper than you would normally pay for something like this. But it gives you installation instructions. Talks about removing the factory flares, which I have another video on how to do that. Install supplied marker lights on front flares. So it comes with new LED lights in our kit here. It also comes with like this rubber channel with some tape on the back, which you're supposed to stick on the flares at the point where it rubs against the body to help keep it from rubbing on the paint. So I've heard some mixed reviews about how that works, but we'll give it a shot. So the first thing we need to do is install the marker lights according to the instructions. Okay, so this is what the light looks for your Fender Flare. It's an LED marker light. It's generic. It's just got wires on the end, so this part of it is not really plug and play. Once you get that installed in the flare, I'll come back and make my connections after they're installed, but you'll basically have to cut and splice into the factory wiring because it's no longer this bulb attachment. It'd be pretty slick if they had to where there's a connector on here that plugged into here, but it'll probably be a better connection if I just cut and splice it anyway. So figure out which one of these is hot, which one's the ground on the factory, and we'll splice it in there to make our connection. On here, there's no holes. There's no pre-drilled holes, which is actually going to be a good thing for me because I'm not going to use the supplied hardware. I'm going to use some stainless steel screws that I have. That way these don't rust instantly. I'm sure the hardware they give you is not stainless. So anyway, I just get these started in here, and then I will drill them into the flare, being sure not to tighten it down too much because we don't want it to crack and break anything. Okay, so there's what it looks like in place. Pretty good. Alright, so the next thing it says to do is to install the rubber trim on the flare. There's a little tiny piece of double-sided tape in there. So you have to start by peeling that off just a hair. Alright, got that installed all the way across. So in theory, we're ready to bolt the flare on here. Alright, so essentially you just take a screw, a fender washer, push it through, and then a nut on the back. Except the front most one, which I'll show you. So it comes with the fender washer. Here's your screw. And your nut. So pretty self-explanatory and easy. I'll get started here. So I've got it bolted in place, and you may remember if you watched my video on how to remove the factory flares, the 3 nut certs that go down right here all stripped out and had to be removed. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. With the new hardware, I was able to reach up in here and get 2 of them in just by putting a nut on the back. And for the third one, remember I told you there's a couple ways around that. I'm going to use one of these plastic nylon push rivets in this hole right here, which I know it's hard to see. That'll just hold this in place. It's already on there really good with just the ones that I could get in there, but this is just for a little bit of extra in case I hit something with the flare. Alright, on the back, same thing. We need to put our rubber channel on all along here. Once I get that done, we'll come back and we'll start mounting it to the side of the Jeep. Pretty easy stuff here. Alright. On the back here, it's just a little different because you're going to have to, like I showed you in the removal video, you have to pull the plastic aside to be able to use the hardware and get it back up in there. So I'm going to try to move the plastic and hold it with my fingers to get these started. And if that doesn't work, I'll just use some of the factory hardware. Alright, so on the back, I ended up just reusing the factory hardware, and I had one spot down here that needed, where the nuts broke off. I ended up using one of those nylon push washers like I showed you, and I'm probably going to come back and put a self-tapping sheet metal screw with a washer here, just because, I mean, it's not going anywhere, it's tight. But so then there's where one of the factory nuts was, and the rest were those factory. And the reason I did that is because the new ones are Phillips head screws, and a few years from now, if I go to take this apart, and it's a little more difficult back here than it is up front, I'm going to wish I had something with this 8mm head on it instead of a Phillips head screw that's rusted out. And we'll just strip right out. So that worked good. They're on here nice and tight. So now it's time to go over to the other side. But for the purposes of this video, the other side is exactly the same as this side, so hopefully that helps you out. Alright, got them installed. Everything looks good. Now we're going to wire up our lights. So come under here, strip your factory wiring. Here on this 2005 TJ, this yellow and white wire is the positive, and the white with the green stripe is the negative for the driver's side. Alright, now over here on the passenger side, the positive wire is once again the white and yellow wire. The negative one is a white and looks like a brownish orange. And then again, this is on my 2005 TJ. Might be slightly different on yours. Alright, so I'm a solder and heat shrink type of person. So I've got the connection made in here. And then I tucks neatly up into this little channel right here, and then zip ties right here into this factory hole, and tucks that all up in there neat and tidy like. It's going to be a nice spot to catch a lot of mud. Anyway, so there it is. Project is complete. I think it turned out pretty good. Alright, so there's the finished product. I think it looks pretty good. Like I said, this Jeep has no lift, factory suspension, 31-inch tires, and it looks perfect to me. A little bit more spacing in the fender to make it look a little bit like it has a 2-inch lift when it really doesn't. So I'm pleased with that look.